6 years. That is exactly 2,190 days of absolute silence. Most people couldn't last an hour without whispering a secret or shouting in anger. But for Isla, silence wasn't a choice, it was survival. She knew that the moment she opened her mouth, the moment her true voice was heard, her life as she knew it would end. She was hiding in plain sight, scrubbing floors for the Onyx River pack, invisible and forgotten. But secrets have a way of rotting from the inside out. And when Alpha King Kieran Blackwood walked through those doors, looking for a mate, Isla realized that 6 years of silence might not be enough to save her from a destiny written in blood. This is the story of the girl who pretended to be mute, and the king who listened too closely. To understand why a 22-year-old woman would choose to cut out her own tongue metaphorically, you have to go back to a rainy Tuesday in November 2018. The location was a small, dilapidated cabin on the edge of the Washington State tree line, just off Highway 9. Isla Danvers was 16 then. She wasn't an Omega yet. She was just a frightened girl holding her mother's hand while her father, Aiden, barred the door with a heavy oak table. "Listen to me, Isla," her mother, Sarah, had whispered, her hands trembling as she cupped Isla's face. "Your voice, it carries the command. If the High Council finds out, if the Alpha finds out, they will breed you like livestock or kill you out of fear. You must never speak again. Do you understand? You are mute. You have always been mute." That was the last thing her mother ever said to her. 10 minutes later, the rogue wolves broke through the windows. Isla survived only because she hid in the crawlspace beneath the floorboards. Her hand clamped over her own mouth so hard she drew blood, watching through the cracks as her parents were slaughtered for a debt they didn't owe. When the Onyx River Pack Patrol found her 3 days later, dehydrated and in shock, she didn't say a word. She couldn't. The trauma was the perfect cover. The pack doctor, a kindly but incompetent man named Dr. Eris Thorne, diagnosed her with psychogenic aphonia voice loss due to severe trauma. Isla was taken in not as a pack member, but as a charity case, an Omega, the lowest of the low. Fast forward 6 years to present day. The Onyx River Pack House was a sprawling estate that smelled of pine cleaner and old money. For Isla, life was a cycle of bleach, dirty laundry, and invisibility. She had perfected the art of being a ghost. She wore baggy gray sweats that hid her figure, kept her dark hair tied in a messy, unappealing bun, and walked with a hunch. She communicated with a small notepad and a series of nods. Over the years, the pack members had ceased to see her as a person. She was just the mute girl. They spilled their secrets in front of her, assuming she was too stupid or too broken to understand the political machinations of the werewolf world. She knew that Alpha Silas, the leader of Onyx River, was skimming money from the pack's construction business. She knew that his daughter Beatrix, a cruel, beautiful she-wolf with a penchant for tormenting Omegas, was sleeping with the beta of a rival pack. Isla knew everything, but she said nothing. But the routine was shattered on a crisp October morning. Isla was polishing the silverware in the grand dining hall when Beatrix stormed in, her heels clicking aggressively on the hardwood. She was followed by her entourage of sycophants. "Did you hear?" Beatrix shrieked, looking equal parts terrified and excited. "He's coming. Here. To Onyx River." "Who?" one of the girls asked. "The king," Beatrix hissed, checking her reflection in the window. "Alpha King Kieran Blackwood. He's starting the Moonlight Tour early. He's claiming rights to inspect every pack in the territory." Isla dropped a silver spoon. It hit the floor with a deafening clang. The room went silent. Beatrix turned her sharp, predatory gaze toward Isla. "Clumsy mute," Beatrix sneered, kicking the spoon away so Isla had to crawl to retrieve it. "Clean that up, and then get out of sight. King Kieran doesn't need to see broken things like you cluttering up the halls. He's looking for a queen, not a charity case." Isla nodded, keeping her eyes on the floor. Her heart, however, was hammering against her ribs like a trapped bird. King Kieran Blackwood. The rumors about him were not kind. They said he was a monster of efficiency, a wolf who had united the warring factions of the West Coast through sheer brutality. But more than that, they said he possessed the true sight, an ancient ability to sense lies. If he came here, if he looked at her, would he see the lie she had been living for 6 years? Isla rushed to the kitchen, her hands shaking. She needed to run. She needed to pack her meager belongings and flee into the human world. But she had no money, no ID, and the trackers would catch a lone Omega within hours. She was trapped. That night, the atmosphere in the pack house was electric. The scent of roasted venison and expensive wine filled the air. Isla tried to hide in the laundry room, burying herself in work, praying the king would stay in the great hall with the elites. But fate, it seemed, had a cruel sense of humor. The arrival of the Alpha King was not a fanfare of trumpets, but a sudden, crushing change in the air pressure. When Kieran Blackwood entered the Onyx River territory, every wolf felt it a dominate aura so heavy it made your knees weak. Isla felt the wave of power hit her while she was folding towels in the basement. It made her wolf, a creature she had suppressed for years, whine and scratch at the back of her mind. He is here, powerful, dangerous, quiet. Isla mentally commanded her wolf. Stay dead. Upstairs, the party was in full swing. Alpha Silas was sweating through his suit, trying to impress the king. Beatrix was parading around in a red dress that left little to the imagination, trying to catch the king's eye. But Kieran Blackwood was bored. He stood by the fireplace, a glass of bourbon in his hand, looking utterly unimpressed. He was a tall man, standing well over 6'4", with hair as black as a raven's wing and eyes that were a startling icy blue. He didn't look like a brute. He looked like a predator in a tailored Italian suit. Alpha Silas. Kieran's voice was a low baritone that vibrated through the room. Your hospitality is adequate. But I smell. Rot. The music stopped. Silas went pale. Rot, my king? We have the finest chefs, the freshest. Not the food, Kieran interrupted, his eyes scanning the crowd. Lies, deceit, the air here is thick with it. He set his glass down. I'm going for a walk, alone. But my king, Beatrix stepped forward, batting her eyelashes. Let me escort you. The house is large. You might get lost. Kieran looked at her, and Beatrix physically recoiled from the coldness in his gaze. I do not get lost, little wolf. He turned and walked out of the great hall, leaving a stunned silence in his wake. Down in the laundry room, Isla was trying to make herself invisible. She had turned off the lights, working by the glow of the hallway lamp, hoping that if she stayed in the shadows, the storm would pass. She heard the footsteps first. Slow, deliberate, heavy. They weren't the scuffling steps of an omega or the hurried pace of a servant. These were the steps of someone who owned the ground he walked on. Isla froze. She pressed her back against the industrial washing machine, holding her breath. The door creaked open. A silhouette filled the frame. Kieran had loosened his tie and unbuttoned his collar. He looked tired, but his senses were on high alert. He sniffed the air, frowning. The smell of bleach and detergent was strong, but underneath it, there was something else. Something rare, like vanilla and rain, but buried deep under layers of fear. Who is there? Kieran asked. He didn't shout. He didn't have to. Isla didn't move. She couldn't speak even if she wanted to, her throat had seized up. Kieran stepped into the room, his eyes adjusting to the dim light instantly. He saw her huddled form against the machine. He paused, tilting his head. Come out, he commanded. It wasn't a request. It was an alpha command, laced with power that forced obedience. Isla's body betrayed her. Her legs moved on their own, stepping into the strip of light from the hallway. She kept her head bowed, her hands clasped in front of her gray sweatpants. Kieran studied her. He saw the fraying clothes, the messy hair, the posture of defeat, an omega, a nobody, and yet the scent was coming from her. What is your name? He asked, stepping closer. Isla pointed to her throat and shook her head. Then she made the sign for mute, with her hand fingers tapping her lips, then moving away. Kieran narrowed his eyes. You cannot speak? Isla shook her head again. She reached into her pocket, pulled out her small notepad, and scribbled, I am Isla. I clean. I am sorry to disturb you, Alpha. She held it up, her hand trembling slightly. Kieran took the note. He read it, then looked back at her. He took another step, invading her personal space. He was so close she could smell him sandalwood, ozone, and pure, raw power. It was intoxicating. Her wolf howled in her head, begging to submit, begging to claim. Isla dug her fingernails into her palms. No, no, no. Isla. Kieran said her name as if testing the weight of it. Look at me. Isla slowly lifted her chin. For the first time, her hazel eyes met his icy blue ones. The moment their eyes locked, Kieran stiffened, his pupils dilated. The air in the laundry room seemed to crackle with static electricity. He reached out, his hand hovering near her face. He looked confused, as if he had found a diamond in a pile of coal. Why do you smell like... Silence? Isla's heart stopped. He knows. Just then, a voice shrieked from the hallway. "There you are, my king." It was Beatrix. She appeared in the doorway, looking breathless and annoyed. When she saw Kieran standing inches away from the dirty, mute Omega, her face twisted in disgust. "Oh God," Beatrix laughed, a harsh, grating sound. "Has the help been bothering you? Isla is a bit simple. She's mute, traumatized. She doesn't know how to behave around royalty." Kieran didn't look away from Isla. His gaze remained locked on hers, intense and calculating. He slowly lowered his hand. "Simple?" Kieran murmured, his voice low enough that only Isla could hear the suspicion in it. "I doubt that." He turned to Beatrix, his mask of indifference sliding back into place. "She was not bothering me, but I find it interesting that your simple Omega has more grace in her silence than you do in your entire vocabulary." Beatrix's jaw dropped. Kieran turned back to Isla. "Go to bed, Isla. We will speak again." He turned and walked out, brushing past a fuming Beatrix. Isla slumped against the washing machine, gasping for air as if she had been underwater. He hadn't just looked at her, he had seen her, and when he said, "We will speak again," it sounded less like a promise and more like a threat. She looked down at her hands. They were shaking uncontrollably. She had survived 6 years, but she had a terrible feeling she wouldn't survive the week. The attic room where Isla slept was freezing. It was little more than a crawl space above the servants' quarters, insulated only by thin wooden planks and the dust of decades. A single, round window looked out over the Onyx River territory, currently battered by a relentless storm. Isla lay on her cot, staring at the water stains on the ceiling. Her heart had not stopped racing since she fled the laundry room. "We will speak again." The king's words echoed in the small chamber, bouncing off the walls like a curse. She rolled over, pulling her thin wool blanket tighter around her shoulders. Her wolf, usually dormant and suppressed by years of fear, was pacing in the back of her mind. It was agitated. It wanted to go back to him. It wanted to kneel at his feet and bare its neck. "Stop it," Isla thought viciously, digging her nails into her palms until crescent moons appeared. "He is not our savior. He is the executioner." She closed her eyes, forcing herself to remember the sound of the door breaking down 6 years ago, the smell of gunpowder and wet fur, the way her father's chest had caved in. She needed the fear. Fear was the only thing that kept her silent. If she spoke, if she let even a single syllable slip, the power in her blood would manifest. Her voice wasn't just a sound. It was a weapon. The command was a genetic anomaly, a myth from the old bloodlines that allowed the speaker to force obedience from any wolf, even an alpha. It was a power that got you killed. Morning came too quickly, bringing with it a sky the color of a bruised plum. The pack house was in chaos. The presence of the Alpha King had turned the usually lazy routine of the Onyx River pack into a frenzied panic. Isla splashed cold water on her face from the basin in the corner, tied her hair back so tightly it hurt, and descended the narrow stairs to the kitchen. The kitchen staff, mostly Omegas and lower-ranking Deltas, were running around like headless chickens. The head cook, a stout woman named Martha, who had always been kind to Isla in a distant sort of way, shoved a tray of pastries into Isla's hands. "Don't drop these," Martha hissed, wiping sweat from her forehead. "They're for the Alpha's private breakfast meeting. And for the love of the moon, stay in the shadows. Beatrix is on the warpath this morning." Isla nodded, her stomach twisting. She took the silver tray, the smell of warm blueberry scones and heavy cream making her nauseous. She moved through the service corridors, the hidden veins of the house that allowed servants to move unseen. When she reached the heavy oak doors of the Alpha's dining room, she hesitated. She could hear voices inside. "It is an honor, King Kieran," came the oily voice of Alpha Silas. "Truly. We didn't expect the inspection until next month. I prefer to see things as they are, not as they are staged to be," Kieran's voice replied. It was calm, bored, and laced with that terrifying authority. Isla took a breath, pushed the door open with her hip, and stepped inside. The room was bathed in morning light. Alpha Silas sat at the head of the table, looking small despite his bulk. Beatrix was to his right, dressed in a silk blouse that was far too formal for breakfast, her hair curled to perfection, and there, sitting opposite them, was Kieran. He wasn't wearing a suit jacket this morning. He wore a charcoal button-down shirt, the sleeves rolled up to reveal forearms corded with muscle, and a faint, jagged scar running down his left wrist. As Isla entered, the conversation didn't stop, but the air in the room shifted. Kieran didn't turn his head, but his nostrils flared slightly. He knew she was there. Isla moved to the sidebar to set down the pastries. Her hands were steady, she had practiced this invisibility for years. She began to transfer the scones to china plates, keeping her eyes strictly on the task. And regarding the border skirmishes with the southern rogues, Silas continued, trying to draw Kieran's attention back. We have increased patrols. Have you? Kieran asked, picking up his coffee cup. He took a slow sip, his eyes drifting toward Isla's back. Because I walked your perimeter this morning before dawn, I found 3 gaps in the fence line wide enough for a truck to drive through. Silas choked on his water. That's impossible. My beta assured me. Your beta is incompetent, Kieran said flatly. Or he is lying to you. Isla flinched. The king's bluntness was brutal. She finished plating the food and turned to leave, hoping to escape unnoticed. You, Kieran said. Isla froze. She stopped mid-step, clutching the empty silver tray against her chest like a shield. More coffee, Kieran commanded, lifting his empty cup. Beatrix's eyes snapped to Isla, narrowing into slits of pure venom. She's slow. My king. I'll get it for you. Beatrix started to rise. Sit down, Kieran said, his voice dropping an octave. The command slammed into the room. Beatrix fell back into her chair, as if invisible hands had shoved her. Her face flushed a deep, humiliating red. Kieran turned his gaze to Isla. I asked her. Isla walked toward the table, her legs feeling like lead. She picked up the silver coffee pot. She had to lean in close to pour it. As she did, her arm brushed against the fabric of his shirt. Zap! A static shock, stronger than anything natural, sparked between them. It was a jolt of pure heat that traveled up her arm and settled in her chest. Isla gasped a tiny, sharp intake of breath. The coffee pot wavered. A single drop of hot black liquid splashed onto the back of Kieran's hand. The room went deathly silent. Silas looked horrified. Beatrix looked gleeful. Isla scrambled back, her eyes wide with terror. She grabbed a napkin, instinctively reaching out to dab the hot liquid away, but stopped herself, terrified to touch him again. Kieran didn't flinch. He didn't even look at the burn, which was already turning red. He looked at her. I am sorry, she signed frantically with her free hand, her fingers flying. I am clumsy. I am sorry. Kieran caught her wrist. His grip was firm, warm, and electric. He held her hand suspended in the air, preventing her from retreating. He looked at her trembling fingers, then up into her eyes. You are shaking, he observed softly. Are you afraid of me, Isla? Isla nodded. It was the only honest answer she could give. Good, Kieran murmured, his thumb brushing over the pulse point of her wrist. He could feel her heart hammering there, a frantic drumbeat. Fear keeps you sharp, but you do not need to fear this. He released her wrist slowly. Leave us. Isla didn't wait. She turned and practically ran from the room, ignoring the death glare Beatrix shot at her back. She made it to the scullery before her legs gave out. She slid down the wall, burying her face in her knees. He had touched her. He had felt the bond. There was no way a wolf as powerful as the king wouldn't recognize the spark of a mate bond. But he hadn't claimed her. Why? Was he waiting? Was he testing her? Or did he think she was so broken, so beneath him, that the bond was a mistake? 10 minutes later, the door to the scullery banged open. Isla looked up to see Beatrix standing there. The Alpha's daughter was no longer wearing her mask of civility. Her face was twisted into a snarl of unadulterated rage. You clumsy mute bitch, Beatrix spat, stepping into the small room and kicking the door shut behind her. You think you're special? You think because the king pitied you, that means you matter? Isla stood up quickly, backing away until her hips hit the sink. She shook her head, holding her hands up in surrender. He humiliated me, Beatrix hissed, stalking forward. Because of you. He looked at you when I was sitting right there. Beatrix grabbed a heavy ceramic bowl from the drying rack and hurled it. It smashed into the wall inches from Isla's head, showering her in shards of pottery. Isla ducked, covering her face. You are nothing, Beatrix screamed. She grabbed Isla by the front of her gray sweatshirt and slammed her against the cabinets. You are a charity case, a broken toy. And if I see you near him again, I will make sure you don't just lose your voice. I'll make sure you lose your hands so you can't even sign your pathetic apologies. Isla's wolf snarled. The instinct to fight back was overwhelming. A single word stop rose to her throat. If she whispered it, focused her will, Beatrix would be forced to her knees, choking on her own bile. The power surged in Isla's chest, hot and heavy, demanding release. Say it, her wolf urged. Crush her. Isla bit the inside of her cheek so hard that copper blood filled her mouth. She swallowed the power. She swallowed the rage. She forced her body to go limp, knowing that resistance only excited bullies like Beatrix. Seeing Isla's surrender, Beatrix sneered. She shoved Isla one last time, sending her stumbling to the floor, and turned on her heel. Stay out of sight, Beatrix warned, or I'll finish what the rogues started with your family. When the door clicked shut, Isla remained on the floor among the broken pottery. She spat a mouthful of blood into the sink. She wasn't crying. She was done crying. She pulled her notepad from her pocket. Her hands were steady now. She opened it to a blank page and wrote a single line, pressing the pen down so hard it tore the paper. I need to leave tonight. Kieran Blackwood sat in the Alpha's office, staring at the file on the mahogany desk. It was thin, pathetically thin. Name: Isla Danvers. Rank: Omega Unverified. Status: Orphaned. Parents: Aidan and Sarah Danvers. Deceased 2018. Medical condition: Psychogenic aphonia. Notes: Non-combative. High anxiety. It's a ghost file, Bastian said. Kieran's beta was leaning against the bookshelf, his arms crossed. Bastian was a massive man with blonde hair and a demeanor that was usually cheerful, but today he looked troubled. There's nothing on her before 2018. No birth certificate in the county records. No school records. It's like she popped into existence the day the rogues attacked. Kieran ran a finger over the name Isla. She didn't pop into existence, Bastian. She was hidden. Hidden from who? From everyone, Kieran said, leaning back in the leather chair. He looked at the burn on his hand. It had already healed, leaving only a faint pink mark. When I touched her, did you feel the shift in the room? I felt you get tense, Bastian shrugged. I thought you were going to kill her for spilling coffee on the royal shirt. I felt the bond, Kieran said quietly. Bastian froze. He pushed off the bookshelf. You're joking. The mute girl? The Omega? She is not an Omega, Kieran said, his eyes darkening. An Omega submits, truly submits. When I used the voice on Beatrix, she collapsed. Her wolf rolled over. But Isla, when I command her, she obeys physically. But her spirit, it stands still. She is terrified, yes. But she is not submissive. She is pretending. Why would someone pretend to be an Omega? Bastian asked, confused. It's the worst life imaginable. To survive, Kieran murmured. And she smells like ozone, like a storm held in a bottle. He stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the rain-soaked grounds. He saw a figure in a gray raincoat hurrying across the courtyard toward the stables. Even from this distance, he knew it was her. The hunch in her shoulders was gone. She was moving with a speed and grace that contradicted her clumsy act in the dining room. Where is she going? Kieran asked. Bastian joined him at the window. Looks like the stables. Maybe she likes horses? Or maybe she's running, Kieran said. A predatory growl rumbled in his chest. She's planning to run. If she's your mate, Kieran, you just have to claim her, Bastian said. One bite. Done. She's queen. No, Kieran shook his head. If she has been hiding for 6 years, she is hiding from something dangerous. If I claim her now, without knowing what she is running from, I might expose her to the very thing she fears. I need the truth first, and I need to hear her voice. She's mute, Kieran. She is a liar, Kieran corrected him, a small, dark smile touching his lips. And I am going to catch her. Isla didn't know she was being watched. The rain was torrential, masking her scent and the sound of her footsteps as she slipped into the stables. She didn't have a plan. Not really. She just knew she couldn't stay in the house another night. Beatrix was unstable, and Kieran was too perceptive. She moved toward the back stall where the pack kept an old, temperamental mare named Bessie. Isla had bonded with the horse over the years. Silence, it turned out, was something horses appreciated. She was reaching for a saddle when the stable doors groaned shut behind her. The sound was heavy, final. The storm outside was suddenly muffled. Isla spun around. Kieran was standing in front of the doors. He had followed her. He was soaking wet, his white shirt clinging to his chest, his black hair plastered to his forehead. He didn't look like a king now. He looked like a force of nature. Going somewhere? He asked. Isla backed up until she hit the wooden stall door. She clutched the saddle blanket to her chest. She shook her head rapidly. Don't lie to me, Isla, Kieran said, walking down the center aisle of the stable. The horses whinnied and shuffled nervously in their stalls as he passed, sensing the immense power radiating from him. I can smell the intent on you. You reek of flight. He stopped 5 feet from her. Why are you running? Isla dropped the blanket. She raised her hands, signing, I am not running. I am working. Working? Kieran raised an eyebrow. With a saddlebag packed with, what is this? He reached out and snatched the canvas bag she had hidden in the hay. He dumped it out onto the ground. A loaf of bread, a bottle of water, a stolen hunting knife, a flashlight. Survival gear, Kieran noted. He kicked the knife away. You were going to run into the rogue lands. In this storm, you would be dead by morning. Isla stared at the knife on the ground. Her exit strategy, gone. Why? Kieran stepped closer, invading her space again. Is it Beatrix? I can handle her. Isla shook her head. Is it me? Kieran asked softly. Isla looked up at him. Yes. She wanted to scream. You are the danger. You are the one who will make them look at me. Kieran saw the answer in her eyes. He stepped in, closing the gap. He placed his hands on the wooden stall on either side of her head, trapping her. He leaned down, his face inches from hers. I know you can speak, he whispered. The accusation hung in the damp air. Isla's heart slammed against her ribs. She kept her face blank, her mouth pressed into a tight line. She shook her head slowly. I felt it, Kieran continued, his voice hypnotic. When you touched me, the bond. It doesn't make mistakes, Isla, and it doesn't bond a king to a cripple. It bonds equals. He moved his hand from the wall to her jaw, tilting her face up. His thumb traced her lower lip. Open your mouth, he commanded softly. It wasn't a generic order. It was the alpha voice, concentrated and directed solely at her. Open. The command hit Isla's mind like a physical blow. Her jaw muscles spasmed. Her body wanted to obey. Every instinct in her biology screamed at her to submit to the Alpha King. She fought it. She clamped her teeth together, grinding them until her jaw ached. She squeezed her eyes shut, sweat beading on her forehead. The resistance was agony. It felt like her bones were vibrating. Kieran watched her struggle. He felt the resistance radiating off her. It was incredible. No Omega could resist a direct command. Even a Beta would struggle. She was fighting him with the strength of an Alpha. Incredible, he breathed. He leaned in and brushed his lips against her ear. You are fighting me. You are strong. Who are you, Isla? Isla couldn't hold it anymore. The pressure was too great. She gasped, her mouth opening to suck in air, breaking the seal of her silence. But she didn't speak. She just panted, her eyes flying open, wild and terrified. Kieran pulled back, looking at her with a mixture of awe and frustration. He hadn't broken her. Not fully. You won't talk, he said, his voice returning to normal. Fine. But you won't run either. He stepped back, giving her room to breathe. You are hereby reassigned, Kieran declared. You are no longer a cleaning girl. You are my personal attendant for the duration of my stay. You will sleep in the suite adjoining mine. You will eat where I eat. You will go where I go. Isla's eyes widened in horror. That was a death sentence. Being in the spotlight? And if you try to run again, Kieran warned, his eyes flashing with a possessive light she had never seen before, I will hunt you down. And when I catch you, I won't be asking nicely for the truth. He turned and walked to the stable doors, pausing before he pushed them open. Get your things, Isla. You're moving upstairs. Isla slid down the stall door until she hit the hay-covered floor. She pulled her knees to her chest. She had avoided being claimed for 6 years. But now, she belonged to the king in everything but name. And the worst part was, deep down, underneath the terror, her wolf was purring. The transition from the attic to the Alpha King's suite was a shock to the system that left Isla reeling. Her new quarters were not a servant's closet. They were a lavish guest room connected directly to Kieran's master suite by a single, heavy mahogany door. The room smelled of lavender and cedar, a stark contrast to the mold and dust she had inhaled for 6 years. There was a 4-poster bed with sheets made of Egyptian cotton, a private bathroom with a clawfoot tub, and a wardrobe that was currently empty, save for her meager backpack of stolen survival gear. Isla stood in the center of the room, clutching her elbows. She felt like a stray dog that had been brought inside not to be adopted, but to be studied. The connecting door clicked open. Isla jumped, spinning around. Kieran stood in the doorway. He had changed out of his wet clothes into a black cashmere sweater and dark jeans. He looked less like a king and more like a man at home, which somehow made him infinitely more dangerous. The casual attire did nothing to hide the lethal grace of his movements. "You are shaking again," Kieran noted, leaning against the doorframe. He held 2 crystal tumblers of amber liquid. Isla didn't respond. She simply stared at his hands. "Drink," he said, walking forward and offering her one of the glasses. Isla hesitated. She signed, "I do not drink alcohol, Alpha." "It's not for pleasure. It's for shock," Kieran said, his tone brokering no argument. "You're pale. Your scent has soured with anxiety. Drink it." She took the glass, her fingers brushing his. That same electric jolt the mate bond snapped between them. Kieran didn't pull away this time. He held the contact for a second longer than necessary, his blue eyes searching hers, looking for the wolf beneath the fear. Isla took a sip. The whiskey burned her throat, a fiery path down to her empty stomach. It made her cough, a harsh, jagged sound in the quiet room. "Better?" Kieran murmured. He took a sip of his own drink, never taking his eyes off her. "Now, sit." He pointed to the velvet armchair by the fireplace. Isla obeyed, sitting on the edge of the cushion, her back rigid. "We need to establish ground rules, Isla," Kieran said, pacing slowly in front of the fire. The flames cast dancing shadows across his sharp cheekbones. "First, you are my attendant. That means you are under my protection. If Beatrix, Silas, or anyone else touches you, you tell me. If you cannot tell me." He tapped his temple. "You write it down." Isla nodded slowly. "Second," Kieran continued, stopping in front of her, "you will eat. You are malnourished. An Omega cannot serve a king if she faints from hunger." He gestured to a small table in the corner where a silver tray of roast beef, potatoes, and steamed vegetables had been placed. "And third," Kieran's voice dropped, becoming soft and heavy, "you will stop lying to me." Isla stiffened. She gripped the whiskey glass so hard her knuckles turned white. "I know you are not mute," Kieran said, crouching down so he was eye level with her. The intimacy of the position was suffocating. "I saw the way your throat moved in the stable. I felt the resistance when I used the alpha voice. A true mute would have no resistance to break. A true Omega would have crumbled." He reached out, his hand hovering over her knee. He didn't touch her, but the heat of his palm radiated through her denim jeans. "I don't know why you are silent," Kieran whispered. "I don't know who hurt you so badly that you decided your voice was a liability. But I am a patient man, Isla. I will wait, and one day, you will scream for me." The phrasing was deliberate. It was possessive, primal, and deeply sexual. Isla's face flushed hot, a traitorous blush spreading from her neck to her cheeks. Her wolf preened inside her chest, scratching at the walls of her mind, desperate to answer him. "Mine," her wolf whimpered. "He is ours." "No," Isla thought frantically. "He is the trap." Kieran saw the blush. A flicker of satisfaction crossed his face. He stood up abruptly. "Eat," he commanded. "Then sleep. We have a long day tomorrow. The council is arriving from Seattle." He turned and walked back into his room, closing the connecting door with a soft click. Isla stared at the wood grain of the door for a long time. She was safe from the cold. She was safe from hunger, but she was in the lion's den. And the lion was beginning to realize that the mouse he had caught wasn't a mouse at all. The next evening, the atmosphere in the Onyx River pack house was suffocating. The arrival of the council members from Seattle meant that the political stakes had skyrocketed. These were the old wolves, rich, conservative, and obsessed with bloodlines. Isla was dressed in a uniform Kieran had provided, a tailored black suit that fit her curves far better than her old rags, though she had buttoned the shirt all the way to her chin. She stood behind Kieran's chair at the head of the long banquet table, acting the part of the silent shadow. The table was laden with excess. Roasted boar, truffles imported from France, and bottles of vintage Cabernet. Alpha Silas sat to Kieran's left, sweating profusely. Beatrix sat further down, glaring at Isla with eyes that promised murder. But the real threat was the man sitting to Kieran's right, Lord Marcus Vane, an elder of the High Council. He was a man of 60, with silver hair and a face that looked like it had been carved from granite. Vane was known for one thing, his obsession with genetic purity. "The rogue problem is escalating," Vane said, cutting his steak with precise, surgical movements. "We have reports of coordinated attacks in the north. They aren't just feral wolves anymore. They are organized." "Organized by whom?" Kieran asked, swirling his wine. He seemed relaxed, but Isla, standing inches behind him, could feel the tension radiating off his shoulders. She could smell the ozone scent of his power gathering. "That is the question," Vane said. He looked up, his pale gray eyes scanning the room before landing on Isla. He frowned. "Since when does a king keep an Omega as a personal guard?" Vane asked, his tone dripping with disdain. "She is not a guard," Kieran said smoothly. "She is my attendant. She smells of fear," Vane noted, wrinkling his nose. "And something else. Something archaic." Isla stopped breathing. The command in her blood was ancient. It was a recessive trait from the first families, the ones who originally unified the packs. It was supposed to be extinct. If Vane recognized the scent, "She is mute," Beatrix piped up from down the table, her voice shrill. "A charity case my father took in. She's harmless, Lord Vane. Just a broken little thing." "Mute?" Vane raised an eyebrow. He turned his chair slightly to look fully at Isla. "Is that so?" "A defect? Trauma," Kieran cut in, his voice hard. "Leave her be, Marcus." Vane ignored the king. He was one of the few wolves old enough to test Kieran's patience. "Come here, girl." Isla didn't move. She looked at the back of Kieran's head. "I said, come here," Vane barked. He didn't use the alpha voice, but the authority of a council elder was heavy. Isla stepped forward, her legs trembling. She stopped beside Vane's chair. "Pour my wine," Vane commanded, gesturing to the empty glass. Isla reached for the decanter. Her hand was shaking. As she poured the deep red liquid, Vane suddenly reached out and grabbed her wrist. His grip was painful, his nails digging into her tender skin. Isla gasped silently, the wine sloshing over the rim of the glass and staining the white tablecloth blood red. "Clumsy," Vane hissed. He didn't let go. He pulled her wrist closer to his face, sniffing deeply. "Curious. You smell like the Danvers line. But they were wiped out years ago. Weak stock." "Let her go," Kieran said. He didn't shout. He spoke with a deadly, quiet calm. The temperature in the room dropped 10 degrees. "I am merely inspecting the help, my king," Vane sneered. He squeezed Isla's wrist harder. She felt a bone grind. The pain was sharp and white-hot. In that moment of pain, Isla's control slipped. The command surged up her throat like bile. It wasn't a choice. It was a reflex. When a wolf of her bloodline was in pain, the voice demanded the aggressor to stop. Her lips parted. The air around her seemed to warp, the pressure in the room spiking. "Rel." She caught the word in her mouth, biting her tongue so hard that blood filled her mouth instantly. She swallowed the sound, choking on it. The suppression of the command backfired, sending a shock wave of psychic energy through the room. The crystal wineglass in front of Vane shattered. Crash. Shards of glass flew everywhere. Vane released her wrist, recoiling in shock, a small cut on his cheek. The room went deathly silent. Every wolf at the table froze. They had all felt it, a pulse of raw, unadulterated power. It felt like a bomb going off in a library. "What was that?" Silas whispered, terrified. Isla stumbled back, clutching her bleeding wrist. She looked at Kieran. Kieran was looking at her. His eyes were wide. He hadn't just felt the pulse. He had felt the source. He was the Alpha King. He knew the feel of the command. It was the only power that rivaled his own. He stood up slowly. "An accident," Kieran announced, his voice booming, breaking the trance of the room. The glass was flawed. The temperature change shattered it. "That was no temperature change," Vane said, touching his bleeding cheek. He looked at Isla with a new, terrifying dawning realization. "That was pressure." "It was an accident," Kieran repeated, stepping between Vane and Isla. He turned his back on the council elder, effectively cutting him off, a massive insult in wolf culture. Kieran grabbed Isla's uninjured arm. "You are bleeding. Come." He dragged her out of the dining hall, not waiting for permission or excuses. He marched her through the corridors, the servants scattering out of his path. He didn't stop until they were inside his suite. He slammed the door and locked it. Isla stood in the center of the room, cradling her wrist. Her heart was hammering so hard she thought she might die. She had almost done it. She had almost commanded a council elder. Kieran turned to face her. He looked furious. But beneath the fury, there was something else. "Awe." "You," Kieran breathed. He ran a hand through his hair, pacing the room like a caged tiger. "I thought you were just a wolf with a strong will. I thought you were hiding a crime, or a scandal." He stopped and looked at her, his blue eyes piercing her soul. You aren't mute because you can't speak, he said, his voice trembling with the revelation. You're mute because you can't afford to speak. He walked over to her, taking her injured wrist gently in his hands. He looked at the bruising Vane had left. Then he looked at the shattered glass that was still caught in the hem of her sleeve. The command, Kieran whispered. You have the voice of the ancients. Isla began to cry. Silent tears tracked down her face. It was over. The secret she had kept for 6 years, the secret her parents had died for, it was out. She waited for him to kill her. The council executed anyone with the command. They were considered too dangerous to live, a threat to the hierarchy. Kieran wiped a tear from her cheek with his thumb. Why didn't you use it? He asked softly. You could have brought Vane to his knees. You could have forced him to cut his own throat. Why did you hold it back? Isla pulled her hand away. She frantically searched for her notepad on the table, found a pen, and scribbled with her shaking left hand. Because I am not a monster. She shoved the note at his chest. Kieran read it. He closed his eyes for a moment, letting out a long breath. When he opened them, the ice in his gaze had melted into something burning hot. No, Kieran said. You are not a monster. You are a queen. He took the notepad from her and tossed it onto the armchair. But Vane suspects, Kieran said, his tactical mind taking over. He felt the pressure. He will check the records. He will look for the Danvers lineage. By morning, he will know that Aidan Danvers was a descendant of the Aethelgard bloodline. He grabbed Isla by the shoulders. We have to leave, Kieran said urgently. Tonight. I cannot protect you here. Vane has the authority to seize you for testing if he suspects you have the command. We need to get to my territory, to the Citadel. Isla stared at him. He was going to run? With her? Why? She mouthed. Kieran paused. He looked down at her, his expression raw. Because, he said, his voice rough, I have waited 100 years to find my mate. I will burn this entire kingdom to ash before I let them touch you. The declaration hung in the air, heavy and absolute. Amate. He had finally said it. But before Isla could process the word, a loud banging echoed from the hallway. Open up. It was Vane's voice. By the order of the council, we demand custody of the girl. Kieran cursed. He looked at the heavy door, then back at Isla. Do you trust me? He asked. Isla looked at the door, which was already shuddering under the blows of Vane's guards. Then she looked at the king, who was offering to become a fugitive for her. For the first time in 6 years, Isla made a choice not out of fear, but out of hope. She nodded. Good, Kieran said. He walked to the balcony doors and threw them open. The storm was still raging outside, the wind howling. We were 3 stories up. Jump, Kieran commanded. He didn't use the alpha voice. He didn't have to. Isla ran to the edge and leaped into the darkness, with the Alpha King right behind her. The fall was terrifying, a blur of wind and rain. But they didn't hit the ground. They hit the canopy of the ancient oak tree outside the Alpha's suite, branches whipping against their skin before they tumbled onto the wet, muddy lawn below. Kieran took the brunt of the impact, rolling with a groan to shield Isla's body with his own. They didn't have time to recover. The shouts from the balcony above were already turning into the howls of shifting wolves. Run, Kieran gritted out, pulling Isla to her feet. My car is at the edge of the perimeter. They sprinted through the storm, the mud sucking at their boots. Isla's lungs burned, but her hand was locked in Kieran's, a lifeline of heat in the freezing downpour. They were 50 yards from the black SUV when 3 massive gray wolves burst from the tree line, cutting off their path. Vane stepped out from behind them, holding a tranquilizer rifle loaded with wolfsbane. A king running like a common thief, Vane shouted over the thunder. Give me the girl, Kieran. She is a biological weapon. She belongs to the council. Kieran stepped in front of Isla, his chest heaving. Over my dead body. That can be arranged, Vane sneered. He didn't aim at Kieran. He aimed at Isla. But before Vane could pull the trigger, Kieran shifted. It was a violent, instant transformation. 1 second he was a man. The next he was a midnight black wolf, launching himself at the 3 guards. The fight was brutal. Kieran was an Alpha King, powerful and lethal, tearing through the first 2 wolves with ease. But he was outnumbered. As he turned to snap at the second guard, Vane raised the rifle and fired. The dart hit Kieran in the flank. He roared a sound that shook the ground, but the wolfsbane worked fast. His legs buckled. The great black wolf collapsed into the mud, panting, his blue eyes glazing over. No! Isla's internal scream was so loud it hurt. Vane walked over to Kieran's prone form, kicking the king in the ribs. He looked up at Isla, a cruel smile twisting his face. Now, girl, come quietly, or I put the next one in his heart. Isla looked at Kieran, dying in the mud for her. She looked at Vane, the man who represented the system that had killed her parents. Something inside her snapped. The dam she had built for 6 years didn't just crack. It exploded. The fear vanished, replaced by a cold, ancient rage. The power in her blood boiled up her throat, tasting like iron and ozone. She didn't need to shout. The command didn't require volume. It required will. Isla stepped forward, her hazel eyes glowing with a terrifying gold light. She looked directly at Vane and the remaining guard. She opened her mouth, and for the first time in 6 years she spoke. Kneel. The word hit the air like a physical shockwave. The rain seemed to stop mid-fall. The pressure dropped so sharply that Vane's rifle shattered in his hands. It wasn't a request. It was absolute law. Vane's eyes rolled back in his head. His knees hit the mud with a sickening crack. The guard beside him collapsed face first into the dirt, whimpering, forced into total submission by a biological imperative he couldn't fight. Isla stood over them, the rain plastering her hair to her face, vibrating with the aftershocks of the power. She breathed heavily, her throat raw. Sleep, she whispered. Vane and the guard slumped over, unconscious instantly. Silence returned to the clearing, save for the thunder. Isla rushed to Kieran. She fell to her knees in the mud, her hands hovering over his fur. Kieran? Kieran, please. The black wolf blinked. The gold in Isla's eyes faded back to hazel as the adrenaline crashed. She was terrified. Had he heard? Did he know she was a monster? Kieran's form shifted, bones cracking and reshaping until he was a man again, lying shirtless and shivering in the mud. He reached up, his hand trembling, and cupped her cheek. He didn't look afraid. He looked at her with a reverence that stopped her heart. I heard you, he rasped, coughing as the wolf's bane left his system. Beautiful. I hurt them, Isla stammered, her voice unused and raspy, sounding like gravel. I used it. You saved us, Kieran corrected. He sat up, wincing, and pulled her into his chest. He kissed the top of her wet head. Let them come. Let the council come. Let the whole world come. With my strength and your voice, we will rewrite the laws. He looked deep into her eyes. Let's go home, my queen. Isla nodded, tears mixing with the rain on her face. She helped him to the car, leaving the unconscious elder in the mud behind them. She wasn't the mute girl anymore. She was Isla Danvers, the Alpha King's mate, and she was finally done being silent. Wow. The moment she finally spoke gave me chills. Isla went from a silent observer to the most powerful wolf in the pack, and Kieran's reaction was everything we hoped for. No fear, just pure love and acceptance. This story proves that sometimes your biggest secret is actually your greatest strength, but the story doesn't have to end here. Vane is still alive, and the council won't be happy about an Omega wielding the command. Do you think Isla and Kieran can take down the High Council in Season 2? Or will her power eventually consume her? If you enjoyed The Silent Omega and want to see more stories like this, please destroy that like button. Let's try to hit 10,000 likes for this finale. Don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell icon so you never miss a chapter. And comment down below. If you had the power of the command, what is the first thing you would say? Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next story.
Hi, my name is Mountain Confessions, the owner and manager of Mountain Confessions. After watching the video, she pretended to be mute for 6 years to avoid being claimed. Until the Alpha King found out. I'd really like to know what you think. How did this story make you feel? What stayed with me most was the tension between fear and freedom. This story explores what it means to carry a secret for a long time, and the emotional weight that can come with hiding part of yourself. At the same time, it's also about trust, understanding, and what happens when the truth finally comes to light. One gentle lesson I took from it is that honesty can be difficult, but meaningful relationships often grow through openness and mutual understanding. Did you sympathize more with her decision to keep the secret, or with the reaction after it was discovered? And which moment stood out to you the most as the story unfolded? Maybe there's a reminder here to be patient with others, because we rarely know the full story behind their choices. If this story meant something to you, I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments. And if you enjoy stories like this, feel free to like or subscribe. Thanks for spending part of your day with us and being here with our community.